You'd probably think this man is just an ordinary old miner, but this is the same man who survived hanging from a signpost, washed his wounds with fuel, held onto the bottom of a flying airplane, crossed an entire desert alone, and somehow became the owner of a fortune worth killing for. His name is Yorma, a retired military legend who was about to teach an entire army the meaning of fear. After discovering a fortune in gold, Yorma quickly packed everything and began heading back home. But he had no idea that the world behind him had already changed. An entire community had been wiped out by a ruthless army marching across the land. Then, on his journey back, Yorma suddenly crossed paths with the very soldiers responsible. At first, they barely paid attention to him. To them, he was just another harmless old man wandering through the wilderness. But standing among those soldiers was Axel, a commander who was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Just as Yorma continued his journey, another group of soldiers suddenly blocked his path. They forced him off his horse and quickly realized he was nothing more than an old gold miner. Laughing at him, they shoved him around and ordered him to kneel. Then one of them shot his loyal dog without hesitation. The gunshot echoed across the desert, making Axel believe his men had already finished the job. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. That single gunshot dragged Yorma back to the brutal life he had left behind years ago. Without warning, he pulled out his mining pick and drove it straight through one soldier's skull. Before the others could even react, Yorma launched a relentless attack, taking them down one after another in a vicious fight. Hearing the commotion, Axel rushed back with his men. But by the time they arrived, every soldier was already dead, and Yorma had vanished without a trace. Then Axel noticed something lying beside one of the bodies. A piece of gold. In that moment, he realized Yorma wasn't just an old miner. He was carrying a fortune worth hunting down. Axel immediately ordered his men to hunt him down. The armored vehicle opened fire without mercy, forcing Yorma to flee across the open desert as bullets rained down around him. But just when it looked like he had escaped, disaster struck. His horse stepped directly onto a hidden landmine. The massive explosion killed the horse instantly and hurled Yorma across the desert. When he finally opened his eyes, he realized something terrifying. He had landed in the middle of an entire minefield. Moments later, Axel and his soldiers surrounded him from a safe distance. Instead of panicking, Yorma calmly began gathering every piece of his scattered gold while Axel watched in complete disbelief. Even Axel's second-in-command couldn't understand why the old miner wasn't trying to run. Then, just as Yorma stood up, he casually tossed a small stone onto the ground. Boom! A hidden landmine exploded. Without hesitating, Axel's men opened fire into the smoke. But Yorma raised his heavy mining shield, blocking the deadly hail of bullets. Then one reckless soldier rushed after Yorma, but within seconds, Yorma hurled a hidden landmine straight at him, and the explosion instantly tore him apart. Escaping the battlefield, Yorma disappeared deep into the wilderness. After surviving countless battles throughout his life, a forest like this was nothing new to him. Finding an abandoned vehicle, he stopped to remove the bullet from his leg and catch his breath. But moments later, Axel and his men arrived with a deadly K-9 unit. Realizing the dogs would track him down, Yorma quietly crawled beneath one of the moving military trucks and sliced open its fuel tank. Gasoline immediately began pouring onto the road, forcing the entire convoy to stop. Yorma took off running toward the nearby river. The soldiers instantly released the K-9 unit after him. Yorma set himself on fire and sprinted straight toward the water. The soldiers opened fire from every direction, but before the bullets could reach him, Yorma dived beneath the river and disappeared. Axel immediately sent one of his soldiers to search the river. But seconds later, Yorma suddenly emerged from the water, using the soldier's lifeless body as a human shield. The soldiers unleashed a storm of bullets, but Yorma slipped through the gunfire and escaped once again. By nightfall, he finally reached a nearby village. But instead of finding safety, he found the entire place burning to the ground. Exhausted, Yorma searched for somewhere to hide and rest. Then suddenly, he spotted his loyal dog running back toward him. But the next second, he noticed a bomb strapped to the dog's body. Before he could remove it, the explosive detonated, sending him crashing to the ground. When Jorma opened his eyes again, Axel was already standing over him. His men had tied him to a wooden pole, leaving him to die slowly. Before walking away, Axel quietly slipped a piece of gold into Jorma's pocket, a final gesture of respect for the man who had given his entire army the fight of their lives. The next morning, Jorma was still alive, using the metal rod in his leg to keep himself from hanging. Then a passing fighter plane shook the weakened pole, sending him crashing to the ground. Just then, 2 soldiers arrived to refuel their aircraft. Thinking Jorma was already dead, one soldier walked closer, only for Jorma to strike first and knock him unconscious. The second soldier rushed over, but Jorma silently took him down as well. Seeing a helicopter nearby, Jorma knew the hunt wasn't over. Without flinching, he burned his wounds shut, pulled the bullets from his body, poured fuel over the injuries, and prepared to continue chasing Axel. When Axel and his convoy finally reached the highway, they found a crashed aircraft blocking the road. As they moved closer, they froze. The dead pilot was one of their own, still tied up with the same rope they had used on Jorma. Realizing Jorma was hunting them now, Axel immediately ordered everyone to keep moving. But it was already too late. One soldier suddenly disappeared from the back of the truck without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, Jorma secretly climbed into the prisoner's truck and handed weapons to the captives. Outside, the soldiers remained completely unaware. Seconds later, Jorma drove his pickaxe straight through the roof, instantly killing the driver. He tossed the body aside, handed the wheel to one of the prisoners, and jumped onto Axel's armored vehicle. As the stolen truck sped forward, the freed captives opened fire on the surrounding soldiers, wiping them out one after another. Meanwhile, Jorma began smashing through the armored vehicle with his pickaxe, determined to reach Axel. The armored vehicle suddenly came to a stop. Axel's second-in-command jumped out and unleashed a barrage of bullets, forcing Jorma into a brutal hand-to-hand fight. The two exchanged crushing blows until they both crashed to the ground. Watching from inside the vehicle, Axel refused to wait. He ordered the convoy to keep moving and abandoned his own man. Jorma quickly grabbed a motorcycle and raced after the escaping commander. Moments later, Axel reached the waiting aircraft. He shot the armored truck's driver without hesitation, climbed aboard, and prepared for takeoff. Seeing the plane lifting into the sky, Jorma opened fire. Without thinking twice, he threw away his gun, gripped his pickaxe, and drove it straight into the underside of the aircraft. As Axel believed he had finally escaped, Jorma was already hanging beneath the plane, silently cutting his way inside. Inside the aircraft, Axel heard strange noises echoing through the cabin and immediately grabbed his gun to investigate. The moment he spotted Jorma hurled his pickaxe, knocking the gun straight from Axel's hand. Without wasting a second, the two launched into a savage hand-to-hand battle thousands of feet above the ground. They exchanged brutal punches again and again, but Axel slowly gained the advantage, beating Jorma without mercy. Just when it looked like Jorma was finally out of options. If you're enjoying this recap, make sure you hit that subscribe button because this ending is absolutely worth watching. Jorma suddenly noticed the steel cable wrapped around Axel's arm. Thinking fast, he locked the cable onto one of the aircraft's live bombs and released it. Before Axel could react, the bomb ripped him straight out of the plane. Seconds later, a massive explosion lit up the sky. But the nightmare wasn't over. Jorma suddenly realized the aircraft was crashing. He rushed into the cockpit, only to discover the pilot had already died from the earlier gunfire. With only seconds left, Jorma grabbed a rope, climbed beneath the aircraft, and tied himself to the bottom just before it slammed into the ground in a massive explosion. Meanwhile, the freed prisoners finally returned home with Axel's second-in-command tied to the front of their vehicle.
Moments later.
Jorma crawled out of the muddy crash site, picked up his faithful dog, walked into town. He slowly walked directly into the building, while many people looked at him strangely as he gently removed his gold, placed his gold on the counter, and finally claimed the fortune he had fought so hard to protect. That's how one man defeated an entire army and lived to tell the story. And that's where the movie comes to an end.